Welcome to our MOOC on Economics of Gender and Development, and we are in the last week of this course. In this week, we will have 4 modules starting from module number 37, and we will try to sort of discuss what kind of policies and approaches that we have taken for gender development in India since independence. And at the same time, we will also try to see what should be our road ahead. In this module and in the next module, we will discuss the different policies and approaches that India had adopted for gender development since independence. This module and the next module, we will try to divide this discussion, and then as we proceed, we will try to summarize the key points and trends of these approaches and also the policies. Let me give you a context for this discussion. If you look around, then you will see that India has made significant progress in gender development since independence. We have number of visible dimensions and indicators where we get to see improvements very clearly, and these improvements are on the fronts of social as well as economic indicators. At the same time, we will also observe that there has been a reduction in the gaps between achievements between the gender, that is, the indicators which are there for male and female. So therefore, we need to understand that how these progress in gender development has taken shape since independence in our country. Let me give you few quick examples. In 1951, the female literacy rate in India was about 9%. In 2024, it is 77%. At the same time, you will also see that gender gap in literacy is reduced to 10% between male literacy rate and female literacy rate. In the 1950s, total fertility rate in the country was 6. That means that on an average, during the period of reproductive age, a woman in India used to have 6 number of children on an average, and therefore women supposed to be bearing high biological and social burden of fertility, and it has been the result of early marriage, low female literacy, and other factors. And in 2023, total fertility rate is reduced to near 2, which is below replacement level. Similarly, during 1950-55, female life expectancy at birth was just 36 years in India, which has doubled to 72 years in 2023. Likewise, the female labor force participation rate in early 1950s was less than 20%, with gender gap of 60%, which has increased to 42% in 2023 with a reduced gender gap of about 30%. So if you look at this table, then you will see key indicators like literacy, fertility, life expectancy, and labor force participation. And you will see the situation in 1950s and situation today. And then we will see certain trends. Like literacy, we will see a strong improvement. In the fertility, we have reduced inequality. In life expectancy, we have reversed the gap, and then labor force, we are making progress, but the rate of progress seems to be low. So therefore, on the whole, we will see that there is an improved literacy, there is a major health transition, improved economic participation, visible demographic transition, reduced inequality, reverse gender disadvantages, and so on and so forth. So therefore, we have made distinct progress in gender development since 1947 when we gained our independence. So agenda for discussion today is that whether there are systematic approaches and policies in India that has resulted these changes and these improvements. That means that whether we have systematic approaches and policies because of which we have seen improvement in gender development in the country as a whole. And we will see that yes, we have certain approaches and policies, and because of which, as a consequence, we have seen these progress over the years. We have constitutional and other regulatory frameworks. We have institutional mechanisms to look after these improvements. We have budgetary provisions, and besides, we also have specific policies and schemes and interventions. So therefore, in this discussion, this module and the next module, we will devote our time to discuss these aspects, that what are the constitutional and regulatory frameworks which are available, which target to achieve gender development, what are the institutional mechanisms that we have put in place, and what are the budgetary provision that we have made, what are the different policy schemes and interventions we have initiated, because of which we have seen the improvements we have already discussed. And at the same time, we will also try to mark what are the overarching shifts in these approaches and policies. What are the different trends? What are the different phases? What are the distinct characters and features of these policies and approaches during different epochs of time? Let me start with the initial phase, and this initial phase will be from 1947 till 1970s, early 70s. And here we will start with the constitutional foundations and early policy frameworks. Now, you will be observing that India's commitment to gender equality is deeply rooted in its constitution. In the constitution itself, we have very specifically and explicitly referred to the gender justice. And for instance, suppose some of the constitutional provisions are Article 14, which says that it will be, guaranteeing the equality before law. Everybody will be considered as equal citizens, whether it is male or female or any other gender. Article 15A, Article 15.3 talks about prohibition of discrimination and also allows affirmative action for women. Article 16 in the Constitution talks about equal opportunity in employment. And more importantly, in the directive principles, the Article 39 and 42 talks about providing equal pay, maternity relief to women, and so on and so forth. So you have different provisions in place in the constitutions, which actually puts a foundation for different policies and approaches which we followed. And these provisions created a normative legal foundation for the country to pursue. And if you look at very critically, then we will find signs of those protective and welfare different activities during our early parts of consideration, that is 1947 to 1970s. All right. Now, if you look at the next phase, that is 1950s, coming from the constitutional mandate, we will see that there has been some major legal reforms. For instance, suppose in 1955-56, we had made Hindu code bills which tried to, the reform and codify Hindu personal laws. And it consisted of 4 major acts. For instance, Hindu Marriage Act, Hindu Succession Act, Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act, and Hindu Adoptions and Maintenance Act. All these acts and legal framework provides certain things. For instance, suppose it abolished polygamy, it recognized divorce legally for the first time in the country, provided for judicial separation, it set minimum age of marriage, gave women absolute ownership over property, daughters were granted rights in inheritance, it established a uniform system of inheritance for all Hindus, it recognized widows, daughters, and mothers as legal heirs, legalized adoption across castes, made it a legal obligation to provide maintenance to wife and children. It defined rules for natural guardianship of minors, etc. So all these things were seen as some foundational activities in terms of recognizing gender and also accommodating gender in the whole idea of newly born country, citizenship as well as development. In 1960s, in 1961 to be precise, we have made another act which is called Dowry Prohibition Act, and which aimed at eliminating the practice of dowry in India. It tried to define dowry. It made giving, taking, or demanding dowry a punishable offense under the Act. It made it cognizable, non-bailable, and non-compoundable offense, and made it more stringent with higher punishments in subsequent years. That is, when it was amended in 84 and 1986, the provisions were made even stringent. We have made certain changes in our labor laws. For instance, suppose we introduced an Article 39E and F providing maternity leave to the women. Article 42 directs the state to ensure just and human condition for work and maternity relief. And drawing from these articles in the Constitution, we have made provisions in 1961 in Maternity Benefit Act that we made an uniform national law for maternity to be implementable in all states, which made protection for women during the period of maternity, and we have provided the paid leave for the period of maternity. It prohibited dismissal during the maternity leave, and even it allowed nursing breaks for working mothers. So what we have done, we have in the initial phases, we have made certain protective or legal foundations, providing, assuring not only the constitutional protection, legal protection, but also conferring different sets of rights to women so that they can be a partner in this newly independent country in making it developed. Then comes the next phase, which we can be divided from 1970s to 1990s. In 1970s, what has happened, that we have a very seminal kind of study, and the title of the study is called Towards Equality, which was published in 1974. It exposed the systematic gender inequality and triggered a paradigm shift, facilitated various women's rights movements. In the entire period of 1970s, India witnessed a different sets of civil rights movements, including the movements towards women's rights. And this report actually, provided the basis for subsequent set of reforms and policies. This report not only exposed the inequality, gender inequality, which was prevailing that period of time, but also provided a strong ground for affirmative actions towards women. And this report resulted in major shift in approaches and policy. In the first phase, it was women in welfare in the 50s and 60s to women in development. So basically, in the first phase, what we have done, we have not changed the gender role as such, but we have sort of provided a protective and welfare measures to women. In the 70s and 90s, there was an approach to accommodate women in partnership for development. So that is the women in development. In our this module, when we talk about the women in development, you will be recalling that we had specific, modules and discussions on these ideas, that women in development and women in development. So women in development approach says that women are to be accommodated in the process of development. So that was the phase from 1970s to 1990s. As a result of this, from 6th plan onwards, we have seen that 5-year plans of the country acknowledges women as one major component for development. It enacted in 1976, the Equal Remuneration Act. It was a landmark step reducing the wage gap, gender gaps, and promoting workplace equality. It mandated that men and women must receive equal remuneration for the same work or work of similar nature, requiring similar skill, effort, responsibility, etc. It also prohibited gender discrimination in recruitment, promotion, training, transfers, and also made the compliance of this act compulsory. All right. So therefore, that we have made progress, that we allow women, we provided incentive to women to come forward and be partner in development process. So that was the phase which is from 1970s to 1990s. At the same time, to facilitate this, there were also attempts for institutional developments. For instance, suppose in 1985, the government of India had a department. It constituted a Department of Women and Child Development. Later in 2006, this department was converted to a ministry, full-fledged ministry. In 92, early 90s, it also provided ground for establishment of National Commission for Women to look after their rights, look after their issues, and also, to facilitate the partnership of women in development. At the same time, during the period of 70s, 80s, and early 90s, we had also, started taking up program level intervention. There were specific programs like development of women and children in rural areas, like IRDP, that is the Integrated Rural Development Program, where in different, the activities, women were made part of the development process. Also, there were specific poverty alleviation programs targeting women. So if we look at this 1970s to 1990s, we can see that there was an increasing recognition of women's economic role. And there was an attempt, clear, distinct attempt of integrating women into the existing development frameworks. So that is the phase which we call women in development. However, the programs remain fragmented, and also there was a question of underfunding of most of the programs. So that is the phase that we have, second phase of our study. Let me come to the third phase, which can be roughly defined for another 20 years, which will start from 1990s to 2010. This period also marks increasing global concerns, and there's a shift in women, approach from women in development to women and development. It actually, talks about that looking at different power structures, different social relations that perpetuate gender inequality, and at the same time addressing those, causes of gender inequality, and together it also allowed gender mainstreaming, that rather than looking at women as a separate component and trying to accommodate, we have to make it a mainstream within the policies, that there should not be any, that should not be considered as other, rather it will be also on an equal footing. And it resulted in a key policy document called National Policy for Empowerment of Women, which was published in 2001, aiming at equal rights, equal opportunities, and full participation in all spheres of life. So this policy, National Policy for Empowerment of Women, underlined the principles of equality, participation, and inclusion. It talks about social empowerment, in which we talked about improving education, improving health and nutrition. Special attention was supposed to be given to the girl child. It talked about the reduction in the maternal mortality rates, access to reproductive health care, so on and so forth. Then it comes to the second component of it, economic empowerment. It provided, the policy provided for access to employment and livelihood opportunities, promotion of self-employment, access to credit, land, and other productive resources. Third component being the political empowerment and participation, which encouraged women participation in decision making and governance and politics, and it supported measures like reservation for women, particularly in local governance. When 92 we have the 73rd and 74th Amendment Panchayati Raj institutions, we specifically relied on this. And then also talking about the elimination of violence against women. It recognized various forms of violence. It recognized domestic violence, sexual harassment, women trafficking, it emphasizes on all the components like prevention, protection, and as well as rehabilitation of the women. During this phase, we have also enacted a lot of important laws. The Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act in 2005, Preconception and Prenatal Diagnostic Test Act in 1994, which prevented sex selective practices, and to address the question of declining sex ratio, and it actually made it a punishable offense, and also Prohibition of Child Marriage Act, where we have fixed the minimum age for marriage for 18 for the women and the 21 for male. And we have also the political empowerment through 73rd and 74th amendments, 33% reservation for women, and so on and so forth, right? At the same time, we have also introduced a lot of gender mainstreaming tools like gender budgeting. It was introduced in 2005-06 to mainstream gender concerns in the planning, budgeting, and policy making. It ensured equitable allocation of resources so that it not only reflects the commitment of the government, but at the same time, it also provides actual resources to support gender initiatives. It also tried to establish different gender cells in different ministries and departments. However, due to weak outcomes, due to measurement issues, limited integration with the local governments, inadequate gender disaggregation, expenditure tracking, etc., we could not do much of the progress, but still it provided a strong foundation during that period. So if we look at this overall assessment from 1990s to 2010, then we will see that there is towards a gradual transition towards empowerment, and it was a right-based development. Women entered government structures significantly, political participation and decision making. However, the issues like proxy representation, limited decision making, it challenged certain things, but nonetheless, we have made significant foundation for similar progress in the further improvements in the next decade or so. So therefore, what we have done in this discussion in this module, that we have seen the different phases of gender approaches and policies in India since 1947. 1947 to 1970, we have made the foundations, we have made the welfare provisions, we have made the protection. 70s to 90s, we have made women a partner in the development by providing better access to economic opportunities. And from 90s to 2000, we have enhanced the scope of that coverage and also allowed women to be going towards more transformative role in the society, providing them rights, and then which resulted finally in the last phase, that is 2010, since till today, to go for right-based development approach, which we will discuss in our next module. So this completes the first part of our discussion, module 37. In the next module, that is module 38, we will proceed further and take up the policies and approaches from 2010 till today. Thank you very much.